Thanks for joining another session of Community Action Together. Our special guest today is Wally Orzechowski from the Southwestern Wisconsin Community Action Program. And Wally, first of all, thanks for joining us. I hope you and your family and your agencies are doing well in this very unusual crisis that America faces. So again, Wally, thanks for joining us. Let me ask you, Wally, I've read some of the press that you've gotten, and I think it'd be very helpful to share it with the network. What new responses or innovation has your agency undertaken to respond to these twin crises of the pandemic as well as the economic crisis our communities are facing?
Yeah, well, to some degree, we're accelerating what we've been doing in the past. This part of Wisconsin relies largely on dairy farming. And if you've been reading up on what the farming industry is going through, specifically dairy farming, although other farming as well, it's been really rough the last few years. And so we at Southwest CAP have responded to that as best we can. So in the last 3-4 years, we've been focusing, in addition to everything else we do, we've been focusing on behavioral health issues. Specifically, we have a couple large grants from the 2 medical schools in Wisconsin. One, we're really working with the communities in trying to increase their assets to help people who are having behavioral health problems. But we're also working specifically in the area of opioid addiction recovery and more recently preventing farmer suicides. Sometimes people don't understand that the stresses that are placed in rural areas are just as bad, if not worse, than in urban areas. And so we've been responding to that in the last few years. That's only accelerated now because, in addition to everything else that the farmers have been facing and rural folks have been facing, now they're having difficulty in terms of being able to sell their milk. You've probably seen stories about dumping milk. Not that, farming is the only industry in rural Wisconsin, but it's the major industry, and it kind of bubbles down to everybody else. And so we've been focusing a lot on that. I think the other area we've been primarily focusing on is getting food out to the more distant areas, the more rural areas. If you want to talk about it, it's all rural, but even more rural. And the elderly people, the people who work on the farms. It's not easy for them to come in and to utilize a food pantry. So luckily we got a nice donation from the Alliant Foundation here. And we use that to convert a bus. We call it a pop-up bus. It's not a new concept. It's been around for a while, but for us it's new. And so we've been making the rounds in the more distant areas. And as of today, I know there's been over 1,000 since we started the beginning of March, food pantries that have been dropped off in the more distant rural communities where people are just having an awful lot of difficulty. So that's in addition to everything else we do, but that's both behavioral health and the food issues have kind of risen to the forefront and certainly being much more poignant than ever before.
I think you've got a background in behavioral health.
And public health, actually.
Public health.
Which is kind of helping now, for sure.
Yeah, and so that's really come into play. Has that guided some of your decisions or some of the initiatives that CAP has undertaken?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have a good working relationship with all 5 of our county health departments here, and we're kind of in sync. And, we've been talking now recently about contact tracing, and so, we're having conversations about that as well. So we're kind of like mind, and Southwest CAP was heavily involved in starting free medical clinics, partnering with the health departments, and then a free dental clinic for kids, partnering with another health department, and then a federal qualified health center dental clinic as well. So I think for community action agencies, we've done a little bit more in the area of health than others, and that's largely because of my background and my ability to understand, public health issues and what's going on with our local health departments and the need for additional services.
During this pandemic and the crisis we're in, has there been any surprises that you've seen, that you've discovered in your community? Surprises in terms of who needs your assistance, how the community responds to you, surprises and problems or areas of concern that you've never been involved with before.
Yeah, well, as I just mentioned, I contacted all 5 of our health departments recently, and I said, well, how are you doing with contact tracing, specifically for those folks who have been exposed to the COVID-19 disease, and we need to track them down and make sure they're isolated. And I was very surprised that they actually need help. I thought they would be more than able to adequately do that tracing. But I heard back from they're not. So I'm starting to have conversations internally and externally in terms of what can be the role of Southwest CAP. In addition to that, I didn't realize that the smaller, more distant communities were that needy and dependent in terms of food. I thought, well, if they needed it, they could come into the food pantries, or they just didn't need it. But we've seen a huge increase in the use of our food pantries, including that bus, in the smaller, more rural communities. And I hadn't anticipated that, at least to the same degree. So it's not a new need, but it's a greater need than I thought, that I thought before.
Is there your agency, and under your leadership in particular, you've got a stellar reputation. So I'm assuming that you're always in the headlines in a very positive way in the media. Is there greater awareness now of the importance of Southwest CAP than during this crisis than maybe existed before?
Yeah, it's been kind of a frustration, and it's probably not unusual in our world that not everybody knows about us. You would think that because of all that we do, but it's been limited to social service agencies and units of government and folks who have used our services. But I think now, because of the media attention we're getting, because of the food, behavioral health, and housing, and a bunch of other things, that I think people are becoming much more aware of us, and that's going to hold true long after the COVID-19 disease epidemic is done. People are going to know much more about us. Certainly, in terms of this bus that we've been using, and I don't want to say that's the only thing, but it's more of a newer thing. We've gotten a lot of emails back and a lot of information out in the media about that. And of course, we want everybody to know, well, we've got a lot of other services too. We have Head Start, we've got weatherization, we've got transportation, we've got a whole range of different services, and they're learning about that as well. So as sad as the situation is, we're also seeing it as an opportunity to let the communities know much more about what we do as an organization, and let them know that we're out there to help them. I think going forward, we're going to be focusing a lot more in terms of community development and economic development, and trying to help these people who have lost so much, maybe their homes, or maybe they're behind in their mortgages, or maybe these small businesses that are behind in their rent or their loans, or whatever it happens to be. We have to do everything we can to help those folks get back on track. And some won't. We understand that, but those that can, we should be helping, because the ramifications of that are very serious, and of course they're employers, and we want as many people to be employed happily and earning a living wage as possible, because then they won't need Southwest CAP. So that's kind of where we're at right now, and we're going to continue to look at other things as time goes on.
I'm assuming you're in a shelter in place in your community?
Yeah, I mean, all our offices are closed. Many of us are working from home most of the time. I'm usually working out of the house. I'm here in the office today. But yeah, we're trying to keep everybody as safe and healthy as possible. We do some transportation rides still. And that's primarily for people who have medical appointments like kidney dialysis and chemotherapy. But we're very careful about that in terms of our drivers and also the recipients of those services. The same way with our food pantries, like everywhere else, our elderly volunteers are home. So it's younger people who are volunteering right now. But even that, with that, the process is much different, as probably is throughout the United States. Folks don't come in, we put the food out for them, that type of thing. So we're doing everything we can to keep everybody safe. And like every other community action agency, we're learning a lot about working remotely, and that'll probably continue into the future. Not as much as it is right now, but I think it is really very important that we keep our staff and our volunteers and everybody that we're helping as safe as possible. It's not 100%, a sure thing, but we're doing as much as we can to make sure that no one is infected, either any of us or any of the people we serve.
How difficult was it for you as the director, but the agency to pivot almost 180 degrees from being open for business face to face with all the clients and the community to working remotely, working from home and being separated? Was that a difficult process?
Yeah, it was a difficult process, but it went exceptionally well. And I will give credit to our staff, to Kathy, who's sitting here with me, and to many others. We started planning this weeks before the state started closing down, because we kind of knew what was happening, was coming our way, and we had multiple phases. In the first phase, we're being a little bit cautious, going to the third phase, where essentially everything is closed down in terms of in-person contact, but we're still trying to provide as many services as we can. So I think we saw what was happening long before others saw what was happening, and we were prepared for it. And so we were able to pivot relatively effectively and relatively well, but I'm not saying it was easy. I mean, it was very difficult. Each program director had to figure out how to do it. And quite honestly, where we're at right now is just the reverse. As things ease up, and that may be a while, but as things ease up, we're putting together our plans for getting back into business and doing everything that we used to do. Although I'm sure probably for many years, it'll be done differently than it was before.
So there are a lot of lessons learned on this, and preparation is one, and you were ahead of the curve on that. It's good. And the way we do business in the future is going to be different, as you pointed out, and the needs are going to be different. You're going to, from what you said earlier, you're going to be focusing more on economic development, it looks like.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Because I mean, we can help people with a lot of things, and like all community action agencies, we do that. But if we're trying to help with people who may become homeless because they can't pay their rent, and there's a hold on that right now, but that won't go on forever.
Right.
And or people who have had small businesses or whatever it happens to be, or have lost their jobs. I mean, we can't get at the other issues unless we get at those underlying issues. And so, we've always, like a lot of community action agencies, help people with rent and help people who are homeless and help people who want to start their small businesses and keep them going. But that's going to be accelerated. We're just going to do much, much more of that, because that's the only way we're going to really make a significant difference on any scale. And so right now, I'm certainly working on trying to identify resources. I've had some success. There are a lot more resources to try and identify that will help us do exactly that.
I really like that answer, and that is, the world's going to change, and we can be part of that change and part of that solution. We've got $1 billion that we were able to secure in the supplemental. It's not out yet, which is a frustration for everyone. How are you going to use your share of that money? Is there a particular need that you're going to apply it to? Is it going to be just for the overall operation? Is there a particular program or project or need you're going to address with the supplemental money?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're going to use some of it to cover some of the losses we've experienced in other areas, because we did have some fees and things like that for transportation. But what we're primarily going to use that for, at least my hope, is staffing. We're going to bring on a few more staff, and their primary focus is going to be on helping people who are really struggling because they've not been able to pay their rent, or they've not been able to pay their mortgage, and also in the area of small business, just what I mentioned a second ago. So that's really kind of our intent. And if it's at all possible, I'm hoping to put together our own pool of funds, whether it be grant funds or long-term loan funds, so that we have something for those folks to manage beyond what's available right now. So clearly, though, the additional CSBG funds is really going to help us big time in terms of our ability to get people back on their feet. I'm kind of repeating myself, but that's kind of our mantra for right now. Yeah. And I think I'm very grateful to be able to have that money, because without that, we wouldn't have been able to bring on additional staff who can do what I just mentioned.
Well, the world's changing, and thank heavens we've got leaders like you that are going to help us figure out the answer. I want to end with a comment about some words that you said earlier, and that in these challenging times, it is also an opportunity. And I wrestle with using the word opportunity because how difficult this is for every family, every community in America. But it truly is an opportunity. It's an opportunity to address unmet needs, to think of different ways of doing business, to create new partnerships, to create awareness, greater awareness of what a community action agency means to the community. So I think your use of the word opportunity is well placed, and I appreciate that. And I know if anybody in community action can take advantage of an opportunity, it's you. And I appreciate it. We're lucky to have you in community action, and your leadership's important. And let's take full advantage of the opportunity to make community action even more effective and more recognized as we go forward. And so, Wally, I want to thank you for your time. Stay safe, stay well, and I wish you, your agency, and your community all the best in the world. Thank you very much.
Okay, bye.